Hello, everyone, and welcome to this Masterclass series we're doing for the Philly Pops as a special time to come together and share information. I'm Terell Stafford, Artistic Director of the Philly Pops, and I'm the conductor of the All-City Jazz Band. And we've brought clinicians in, myself included, to speak about some things that we feel passionately about. And one thing I feel pretty passionately about is the art of section playing. How do we play in the section? How do we prepare to play in the section in a big band? And so one obvious thing that we won't talk about right now, but it's very important, and I do not want to negate it, is the ability to sight read. So finding materials that you can sight read and sight read on a really high level, finding friends that you can sight read with, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. There are books, there's everything that you can find. So we put the sight reading, that's a huge priority. Now I want to ask you, if you haven't gone and grabbed a piece of paper and a pencil, do so for me, because I want you to write some things down. I'll give you a few minutes to grab that piece of paper, pencil. I want you to write down concept of sound. That's the very first thing we'll start with. To play in a trumpet section, of course, we all have to blend in our sounds. But what's really important about blending in your sound is to have your own sound. Not accepting what comes out of the bell of your instrument as your sound. Your sound is something that you have to put a conscious effort to develop. Here's how we develop concept of sound. If we think about a target, the middle of the target is the core of the sound. As we build the rings around that target, are outer layers of our sound. So we start with the core of our sound and we build these layers to develop our sound. For my personal concept of sound, for an example for you, is to think about some players that really influence you. One player that has influenced me all my life has been the great Bud Herseth, who was principal of Chicago Symphony for over 50 years. He's the center of my sound. He's the core of my sound. When I want to hear a trumpet sound, I hear Bud Herseth as my core. As I build outward, the next sound that I hear is another great trumpet player by the name of Booker Little. Booker Little, Bud Herseth are the core of my sounds. As I build outward, I have players like Clifford Brown, that's part of an outer layer. Lee Morgan, that's part of an outer layer. Freddie Hubbard, that's part of an outer layer. Art Farmer, that's part of an outer layer. There's many others, Miles Davis. All these players have characteristics in their sounds that I love. So I'm going to suggest to you, for concept of sound, go identify 5 to 10 players that you really, really love. Make a list. First column is going to be things that you love in the sound. Second column are other things that you hear in the sound. And then you go back to the column of things that you love in the sound, and that's going to end up being your concept of sound. That's what you're going to go after every day. Now, there's some things we can do to produce a good quality sound. This is outside of the concept of sound. What we can do to produce a good quality sound on our instruments. The number one, most important thing is to breathe. Concept of breathing. I love having concepts, as you see. So my concept of breathing are 2 syllables, hu and ho. Ho is my inhale, hu is my exhale. I'll demonstrate. In order to have a sound, in order to have motion in the sound, we have to get air, which is all around us, and stagnant. We have to get air in motion. If we can have motion in our playing, we can create emotion. So thinking about how we're going to take in this air and put it in motion is why I use hu and ho. I would suggest you do that. You can turn on a metronome and count yourself in by saying 1, 2, 3. Okay? That's where we can start with breathing. This can be an exercise you do for 10 minutes a day. You could do it for 5 minutes a day. But in that journal that you started to write down under concept of time, concept of sound, write down breathing. Hu and ho. Inhale, exhale. After we have our breathing, we breathe a few times, we get the motion of the breathing, we have our metronome going. You can put your metronome at 50 beats per minute. That's a great place to start to get you in the rhythm of breathing. After we start to breathe, then what we have to do is figure out how we're going to produce a sound. Me personally, I'm a fan of the mouthpiece. Some aren't, some are. I am. I love the mouthpiece. I feel the mouthpiece is the sound of the trumpet. So I'll spend some time just blowing air through the mouthpiece. Just to feel how relaxed it can be to breathe. And then I'll get a sound on the mouthpiece without a tongue. Okay? So I spend a good 10 minutes just buzzing my mouthpiece. I can do siren. Anything we can do on the mouthpiece to get air flowing, give us flexibility. Next thing we want to do is add the mouthpiece to the trumpet. And as we blew air through the mouthpiece, we want to blow air through the trumpet. But breathing with hu and ho. And then we produce a sound on the trumpet. That was just a snippet of the Vincent Chikowitz flow study. Anything that I'm saying in this masterclass that you want copies of, just let the pops know or let me know, and I'll get copies of these things to you. I'm a believer in the Vincent Chikowitz flow study because my teacher, Professor William Fielder, was a believer in the Vincent Chikowitz flow studies. So that means I am as well. So I play the Vincent Chikowitz flow studies. It's an entire sheet. We can go through that sheet another time if you would like. But that's a way to start working on sound. It's a way to start working on flow. It's a way to get through all the registers of your instrument, which I feel are very important for us to do as a great section player. The next thing we want to do is to work on articulation. Articulation is extremely, extremely important. There's certain ways we can work on articulation, realizing that articulation comes from 2 things, air and tongue. What we don't want to do is put priority on the tongue and not the air. We want to put our focus and our priority on the air and let the tongue respond to the air. I'll give you an example. Here's a note with no tongue. Here's a note with tongue. That was legato tonguing. What I find mostly in jazz as a jazz soloist, the tonguing that I use most is legato tonguing. It's a great thing to work on marcato tonguing and staccato tonguing. The difference between the tonguing is the space between the notes. It's not the air has changed at all. The air continues to move forward, continues to have motion, because we want to create that emotion, even though we're using articulation. But we want to find exercises to work on articulation. One of my favorite exercises is page 177 in the Arbin's book. Another favorite exercise is the Goldman study, Goldman number 1. Goldman number 1 is a great articulation study. So if you're going to work on your articulation, you can practice Goldman number 1, legato. Very important. Not only is Goldman number 1 a great articulation study, but it's also a great study for endurance. When we work or think about endurance, there's no shortcuts. Sorry. Only way that we can work on our endurance is to endure. I'll play a little bit of the Goldman study. Et cetera, et cetera. It goes on and goes on and goes on. So we've worked on articulation. We have sound we've thought about. Now articulation we're thinking about. The next thing I want to talk to you about is flexibility. We have to be flexible, not only on the trumpet, but we have to be flexible in life. To play in a section, we have to be flexible to those around us, being able to listen to what they're doing, and then adapting, changing, adding, adapting to what the other players around us are doing. That makes a great section player, to be a chameleon of the music, to be able to change on a dime when it's needed. So flexibility as a player is very important. Flexibility as a trumpet player is important as well. One of my favorite exercises is on page 44 of the Arbin's book. So we'll practice flexibility using page 44 of the Arbin's book. That's a great place to start. Then what we'll try to do is we'll use different intervals for flexibility. That was an interval of a third. We can try intervals of a fourth. Or fifth. Okay? So working on flexibility is important. After we worked on flexibility with our lips, actually our tongues, it's not really our lips, but they call it lip flexibility. Not sure why, but it's the tongue that changes the intervals. Okay, so after we worked on our lip or tongue flexibility, we want to work on our hand flexibility, because handshakes are very important. So, lip, hand, lip, hand. Okay, so we'll work on the hand flexibility in all registers. If you're playing lead trumpet and you're playing in the upper register, the shakes can be a little easier because the partials are closer. If you're not playing lead trumpet, it's good to work on the hand flexibility and the lip flexibility in the middle register, because sometimes that may be where you'll need it. So that's a really important thing, working on flexibility, so that you have flexibility. You can have flexibility on intervals, or you can have flexibility through the horn. Either or. So you can practice colon studies if you want flexibility vertically, or you can practice Arbin's, page 44, if you want intervallic flow study. All this, if you put into action, will make you a better section player. Then there's a couple things other I want to talk to you about. This interesting beast right here. Most of you know what it is, but it's a plunger. Playing the plunger is an art, and it's a huge part of playing in a big band section. I want to talk to you about the plunger just for a few minutes. There are positions of the plunger. The most important position of the plunger is first position. There's second position, third position, fourth position, fifth position. The two most important are 1 and 5. 3, 4, 2 are very personal. If you want to go after a certain sound, you can experiment with those positions and see what you can get from those positions. So that's the positions of the plunger, really important to know. How do you play the plunger? You play the plunger, you start to learn how to play the plunger away from the plunger. So there's exercises that you can work on called bends. Bends are really, really important. So here are bends. Okay? So those bends are really important. Practicing those bends chromatically all over the trumpet are important. So when you get the plunger, the way that you get a wah sound is to go. You can hear me scoop below. That articulation is very, 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 very similar to what Louis Armstrong would do on a regular basis. His articulation would emulate his singing. So if you listen to Louis Armstrong sing, ba 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 ba, that's very, very synonymous to his articulation. Also, coincidentally, I don't think it's coincidentally, but that's the articulation we use on the plunger. So that's how we get a wah sound, and I'll show you in a minute. To get an ow sound is this. So we're bending the note down. The same exercise we use for bend, we're bending it down instead of coming from the bottom, coming up. So I'll show you. To get what? Ow. Okay? So those are the two sounds you can get on the plunger. Next thing, if you're going to play the plunger, you have to learn how to growl. How do we growl? We hum. We don't do anything with the back of our throat. We don't do anything with our tongue. All we do is go, I'll show you. I'll play a note without me humming. With me humming. Without, with. Okay? So now, if we put all the things we spoke about today together, okay, so that's the plunger. That's what we can do on the plunger. The plunger is going to be very important in section playing. The very last thing to think about, and this can be important as a section player, is just the improvisation, the act of improvising, creating spontaneously. I would suggest for most of you, start with something simple. If we define levels of improvisers from 1 to 10, we have to identify where we are. So for most of us, let's say we're at level 1. I want you to choose a level 1 solo to transcribe. If you can't find any level 1 solos, then you can contact me or the Pops. We can guide you to a list of level 1 solos for you to transcribe. My suggestion is to find a blues. You can find straight note chaser, you can find Bag's groove, you can find many, 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 many blueses. You learn the blues, you sing every solo on that particular track. You can start with something as easy as So What. You can start with anything. It doesn't have to be a blues, but it can be. Find the record Kinda Blue by Miles Davis. Any solo on that Miles played is going to be a perfect solo for you. So yes, it's important to learn theory and harmony. Yes, yes, yes. Theory and harmony are the tools that you need to guide you to be a better improviser. Transcribing is the language that you need to communicate your expression, to communicate your emotion. That's what we need language for. We get language from transcribing. So it's really important to transcribe. Here's a method that you can use to start improvising from a simple transcription. So here's a transcription from a solo by Miles Davis. This solo is from Straight Note Chaser, 1958 with Coltrane. I'll play the melody, and then I'll play a chorus of Miles' solo. Okay? Nothing really complicated, but it's language. It's the beginning of being an improviser. You can take that solo and play that solo over and over. That's the first chorus. There are many more choruses that you played. Learn the choruses, learn the entire solo. Why? You want to know what it feels like to take a great solo. It's really important. Once you know how it feels to take a great solo, then you can try to emulate that feeling each time you play. So I've given you some tools about how to be a better section player, how to develop as an improviser. If the level 1 improviser, if you're past level 1, go to level 5, go to level 6, whatever you feel is appropriate, as long as you complete the transcription. I hope this has been helpful. I can't wait to hear you. If you have questions or comments about anything I said today, feel free to reach out. I'm Terell Stafford. I'm happy to be here. I am Artistic Director of Jazz for the Philly Pops, and I'm the conductor of the All-City Band. And I'm so thankful that we put this festival together to show you the great talent that's here in Philadelphia. Keep swinging. Thank you.